The air in Oakhaven, during this burgeoning seedtime month, carried the heavy, sweet perfume of fruit tree blossoms, a heady contrast to the underlying tension that always seemed to settle over the village as the land shook off winter's grip. It was a season of renewal, yes, but also one of relentless, hopeful labor. The fields demanded attention, the repaired fences needed securing before the summer herds moved too far afield, and the promise of the coming harvest hung tantalizingly in the balance. Anya Meadowsweet, who possessed the quiet strength of the deep-rooted herbs she tended, stood by her window, watching the hesitant light of the early dawn struggle to break through the lingering, cool spring mist. The sun, when it finally managed to ascend, painted the dew-laden leaves in hues of pale gold and soft rose, a comforting, familiar spectacle that usually settled the spirit. Yet, today, even the beauty felt strained, held in check by an unseen worry. Beric Harpswell, already immersed in the meticulous disassembly of a slightly warped wagon wheel, a casualty of the recent thaw, paused, his brow furrowed less by the mechanics and more by the stillness in the normally busy morning streets. His hands, usually steady as stone when coaxing brass or iron into shape, felt a slight tremor of unease. Dalton Fellwinter, ever watchful, was already cleaning his broadsword near the common well, the rhythmic scraping of the whetstone a sharp punctuation mark against the quiet morning. He looked less like a mercenary guarding a town and more like a sentinel waiting for a storm that refused to break. Leela Thistlewick, her apprenticeship in baking momentarily forgotten, sat near the hearth, tracing patterns in the dust, dreaming of the far-off bustle of the city markets, a yearning for excitement tightening in her chest. It was into this strained tableau that the frantic arrival tore the fragile peace. A rider, cloaked in mud-spattered leather, his horse lathered white with exertion, galloped into the square, sounding a wild, panicked alarm, a sound rarely heard outside of border skirmishes. He dismounted awkwardly, leaning heavily on the gate-post, his voice raspy with exhaustion and terror. "Help! By the roots of the old oak, help us!" he cried, addressing anyone who would listen. "It is Silverstream. The lifeblood has stopped. The river, the Silverstream has ceased to flow." The news struck the assembled group with a chill deeper than any winter frost. Silverstream, the tributary that fed much of the regional farming through irrigation channels, was dying. Dalton immediately straightened, the pragmatism of the soldier overriding the morning's calm. "A curse," he grunted, his tone laced with professional skepticism, though the messenger's genuine fear was undeniable. Anya, her compassion immediately engaged, rushed forward, pressing a restorative draught of mint and willow bark into the messenger's hand. "Tell us everything," she urged, her voice soft yet firm, the quiet strength she carried becoming immediately apparent. The man relayed the grim details. The water simply vanished upstream 3 days prior, leaving behind a sluggish, mossy bed and desiccated fields. The crops were already showing the terrible signs of thirst, the vibrant greens of early growth turning brittle and brown. Fear, he said, was choking the villagers worse than the drought. Dalton looked at Beric, then at Anya, reading the silent commitment in their eyes. They were the ones who usually answered the strange calls when the local constables were overwhelmed. "A dry river in Seedtime," Dalton muttered, sheathing his sword with a decisive click. "That isn't natural. We leave immediately. Kaelin, you'll scout ahead. Leela, stay with Anya. Your knowledge of local flora might be necessary for surviving a blight." Beric nodded, already checking the fastenings on his tools, meticulous even in haste. "I can reinforce any temporary sluices or attempt water divination, though this sounds like a task beyond mere engineering, Dalton." Leela, though nervous, held her head high, clutching a small pouch of dried lavender, a small comfort. The journey to Silverstream, a day's hard ride even with the promising spring roads, was agreed upon as the first act of their commitment. The sun climbed higher, now a brilliant, almost harsh light, illuminating the task ahead, a stark, demanding light fitting for the season of hard planting and necessary struggle. They gathered what provisions they could, the thought of Silverstream's wilting fields overriding the simple joy of their own village's blossoming prosperity. The pact was sealed by the desperate plea: Oakhaven would not let a sister village wither. The journey away from Oakhaven was undertaken with a speed born of necessity, yet tempered by the uneven ground characteristic of the seedtime thaw. The roads, recently cleared and patched by communal efforts, were nonetheless soft in places where the sun had not yet fully dried the earth, forcing Dalton, who took the lead with his ranger's instinct, to navigate carefully. The sunlight of mid-morning in Seedtime possessed a keen edge, sharp and demanding, pressing down on the travelers, encouraging movement but offering little solace. Beric and Anya rode side by side, often discussing remedies and water sources, Beric finding an unexpected appreciation for Anya's practical herbal knowledge, which contrasted sharply with his own theoretical understanding of terrestrial structures. They passed scattered homesteads where the usual bustle of spring planting was replaced by an unsettling quiet. The bloom on the apple trees, usually a sign of bountiful promise, now seemed ephemeral and mocking against the dusty silence of the roadsides. Dalton noticed the herds moving toward higher pastures were thinner than he expected. Even the communal joy of their migration felt muted, tinged with the anxiety of the regional drought. As they rode deeper into the countryside bordering Silverstream's catchment area, the scent of blooming flowers gave way to the brittle, acrid smell of dried earth and dying roots. Their first meal, taken around noon by a small, hesitant stream that still trickled, felt meager. Anya carefully prepared a broth using dried winter roots, the last of the stored reserves, seasoned sparingly. Dalton inspected their supplies, his face set in grim lines. "We need water secured by nightfall. This dried terrain will burn through our reserves quickly." By late afternoon, the change in atmosphere became palpable. The light shifted, losing its sharp morning intensity and gaining a dusty, ochre hue as the sun began its descent. This seasonal afternoon light often brought a feeling of settling fatigue, but here, it brought a sense of encroaching doom. They arrived at the outskirts of Silverstream near the time when shadows began to lengthen significantly, stretching across the fields like skeletal fingers. The scene was devastating. Where fields of newly sown cabbage and peas should have been showing tender green shoots, there was only pale brown dust. The villagers moved slowly, their faces etched with a fear that was deeper than simple worry. It was the fear of imminent starvation. They were ushered immediately to the dry expanse where the Silverstream should have roared. The riverbed was a desolate gash in the earth, littered with smooth, pale stones and patches of slick, dying algae. The silence where the rushing water should have been was deafening. After a brief, somber exchange with the village elder, a man whose hope seemed as parched as his land, Dalton decided to seek expert counsel. "We need to know why the water stopped, not just that it has," he stated plainly. Anya, ever observant, noted the way the villagers avoided looking at the dried path, as if the site itself was cursed. It was whispered that Alara, an old hermit known for her eccentricity and deep knowledge of the local water spirits, lived further down the now barren river path. The decision was made to seek her out before resting. As the last vestiges of the seasonal light faded into the deep blue of spring twilight, they walked the cracked earth towards Alara's cottage. The journey was short but heavy with the weight of the unnatural stagnation. Kalen, who had shadowed them silently since rejoining the main party, pointed out unerringly regular disturbances in the silt near the banks, marks that suggested something heavy, perhaps magical, had been dragged downriver recently. Alara's cottage was small, nestled beneath an ancient willow whose branches wept close to the dry stones. When they arrived, the air was still, holding the scent of wood smoke and strange, pungent drying herbs. The travelers, exhausted, looked toward the hermit, knowing the first true piece of the puzzle lay within her guarded words, the lingering promise of the day's work heavy in the cooling air. Alara, when she finally opened her door, was a figure woven from shadows and dried moss, her eyes possessing the unsettling depth of someone who has watched the world turn for many long seasons. She received their frantic explanations with a weary nod, as if the drying of a major river was merely an inconvenient interruption to her day. Anya, utilizing her gentle persuasion and offering a rare, preserved jar of Oakhaven honey, a treasure from the previous autumn, managed to soften the hermit's reserve. Alara gestured him inside, the interior of the cottage smelling richly of peat smoke and dried fungi, a stark contrast to the dead air outside. They settled in, sharing meager rations, some dry cheese and a strong, bitter tea Alara brewed, while the evening deepened into a star-pricked night, the moon a pale disk above the desiccated watercourse. Alara confirmed their worst fears. "It is not nature that has claimed the water, but malice," she rasped, her voice sounding like dry leaves skittering across stone. She spoke of an interruption, a magical siphon. "A dark crystal," she whispered, tracing a shape in the soot of her hearth, "is drawing the very essence of the river spirit to fuel some vanity project. The spirit of the Silverstream is bound, imprisoned." When pressed, the hermit named the architect of this disaster, Malachor, a wizard long disgraced and exiled for delving into forbidden elemental binding arts. "He seeks power, the hubris of those who believe they can command the very arteries of the land." Alara spat the name. His rumored sanctuary, she revealed, lay deep within the sunken marshes, a place so saturated with wild, chaotic magic that even seasoned travelers gave it a wide berth. The marsh was a week's travel away, but the severity of Silverstream's plight demanded immediate movement. Alara also provided the key to entry. Malachor's lair, she claimed, was protected by 3 arcane seals keyed to the primal elements, earth, wood, and air. Day 2 dawned with a heavier, warmer light than Oakhaven had seen. The sun seemed more determined, urging the travelers onward into the vast wilderness separating them from the sunken marshes. Kalen, utilizing his rogue skills, scouted ahead, mapping the most direct, though perhaps not the safest, route. Dalton ensured that Beric and Anya were equipped with enough dried rations to last beyond the first few days, stressing the unpredictability of foraging near corrupted lands. They traveled steadily, the sense of purpose sharpening their movements. They spoke little, the weight of the quest pressing upon them, yet the camaraderie forged in Oakhaven held firm. Beric spent the afternoon meticulously oiling his gear, ensuring every spring and joint was perfect, his craftsman's need for order a small anchor against the chaos ahead. That evening, they camped beneath a cluster of ancient oaks. Dalton oversaw the fire, keeping it low and smoky, wary of drawing attention. The conversation was sparse, focusing only on logistics and the next day's bearing. Dalton recounted tales of marsh survival, his gruff delivery masking a deep concern for the inexperience of the younger members, particularly Leela, who listened wide-eyed. Day 3 was dedicated to reaching the fringe of the sunken marshes. The terrain grew increasingly difficult, the soft spring soil giving way to slick clay and stagnant pools. As they neared the edge of the great bog, the air thickened, becoming heavy with humidity and the stench of decay, a smell far older and more malignant than simple marsh rot. It was a warning. Kalen returned from a scouting run, his face pale beneath his usual composure. The bog breathes, he reported quietly to Dalton. And something large moves through it. I saw tracks, heavier than any beast I know, clawed, blunt. They established a heavily fortified perimeter camp just shy of the marsh proper, the vibrant bloom of the nearby forest seeming to halt abruptly at the marsh's edge, as if unwilling to tolerate the corruption. Before retiring, Anya prepared a strong infusion of feverfew and willow for the group, a prophylactic against the marsh miasma. Dalton stood watch for the first few hours, his professional focus absolute, staring into the oppressive twilight where the swamp began, contemplating the strength of a troll that might guard the first seal, the seal of earth. The quest had truly begun, pulling them from the hopeful labor of Seedtime into the dark embrace of elemental confrontation. Day 4 dawned with a suffocating stillness, the light struggling to penetrate the perpetual, humid haze rising from the sunken marshes. The very air tasted metallic and heavy, a significant departure from the clean, blossoming air of Oakhaven. Dalton, taking no chances, insisted they move out at the first hint of pale morning light, seeking the first seal, the seal of earth, which Alara had indicated was held near the marsh's entrance, likely guarded by the most brutish challenge. Kalen navigated the initial treacherous pathways, his knowledge of subtle ground shifts invaluable as they avoided sinkholes hidden beneath carpets of slick moss. The confrontation came around mid-morning. Shielding themselves partially from the oppressive humidity, they located a clearing where the ground was curiously stable, marked by an unnaturally dense cluster of ancient, waterlogged trees. There, hunkered over a crudely carved runestone pulsing with a faint earthen glow, was the Guardian, a massive swamp troll. Its skin was the color of stagnant mud and river silt, thick and warty, and its eyes burned with dull, territorial malice. Dalton drew his sword instantly. Beric, Anya, cover. Kalen, flank left, distract its focus. The fight was brutal and immediate. The troll's strength was prodigious, its first sweeping blow caught Beric across the shoulder guard, sending the meticulous craftsman staggering back against a thicket, his carefully maintained leather armor groaning under the strain. Beric, despite the pain, managed to wrench a heavy iron spike from his belt and drive it deep into the troll's thigh, earning a roar of pure agony that shook the heavy marsh air. Dalton moved in, a blur of seasoned expertise, engaging the creature directly, his strikes aimed at softening the thick hide while Anya, staying low, desperately applied poultices of healing salve to the minor gashes Beric sustained, her small hands moving with practiced calm amidst the chaos, whispering encouragement. Kalen proved crucial. Darting around the periphery, he used small, expertly thrown stones to strike the troll's sensitive eyes, forcing the beast to pivot awkwardly. After what felt like an age, though perhaps only 15 agonizing minutes, Dalton saw an opening. He feinted a thrust high, drawing the troll's massive arm up, and then drove his blade downward with tremendous force, severing the thick tendons in its elbow joint. The troll collapsed with a shuddering impact that cracked the earth beneath it. It was a dispiriting victory. Dalton was bleeding from a deep graze on his forearm, and Beric was favoring his bruised shoulder, his craftsman's patience thoroughly tested by the sheer, ugly physicality of the fight. Kalen recovered the seal of earth, a heavy, moss-covered stone tablet, from the runestone. The smell of blood and marsh mire clung to them, a grim marker of their success. Day 5 began with the grim necessity of recovery. They retreated slightly from the immediate marsh edge, seeking a patch of drier, less hostile ground to make camp. Rest was minimal. Dalton insisted on maintaining rotating watches, the troll fight having frayed the nerves. Beric spent the early dawn repairing the straps on his vambrace, his movements slow but deliberate, a physical manifestation of his desire to restore order. Anya brewed strong, cleansing teas, helping to soothe the deeper aches. Around mid-morning, they set out for the next objective, the Seal of Wood. This required them to leave the oppressive marsh and venture into the denser, older forest that skirted its eastern edge, a transition felt keenly as the air, while still warm, became cleaner, scented now with rich loam and the intoxicating perfume of the fruit tree blossoms they remembered from Oakhaven. This forest, however, was ancient and watchful. They found the Seal of Wood nestled in a hidden grove, guarded not by brute force, but by intellect. Standing sentinel over a glowing shard of petrified wood was an ancient tree ant, its bark resembling layers of time, its limbs draped with flowering vines that heralded the fullness of seedtime. The tree ant did not attack. Instead, its voice boomed, a sound like the grinding of continental plates. It posed a riddle testing their understanding of growth and patience, themes central to the season. Dalton scoffed internally, preferring a direct confrontation, but Anya stepped forward, her quiet thoughtfulness shining through. She answered the riddle, a question concerning the hidden seed that bursts forth in the blossom, with unexpected clarity, linking the cycle of planting and yielding. The tree ant inclined its massive head, the flowering vines swaying gently. Go with the growth you seek, it rumbled, and the Seal of Wood was theirs. This intellectual victory, following the hard-won physical one, offered a profound lift to their spirits as they considered the next ascent toward the air element. Day 6 shifted the world beneath their boots, exchanging the suffocating press of the marsh for the vast, stony expanse of rolling uplands, the domain of air. Dalton breathed deeper, finding a fleeting, precarious ease in the openness after the fetid gloom, though his eyes ceaselessly scoured the high, bare horizon for threats. The air, now thin and sharply cool at altitude, magnified the glare of the sun, exposing every fissure in the wind-scoured rock. High amidst a crown of crags, where ancient, gnarled pines clung like desperate hands to stone, they located the sprites. These beings, barely contained sparks of mischievous vitality, met the weary mercenaries not with aggression, but with a chorus of echoing, high-pitched laughter. They demanded a contest of speed and play, a game of pure agility, rejecting barter or threats for the Seal of Air. Kalen, usually so reserved, found an unexpected stage for his precise movements. He flowed across the treacherous stone faces, his steps liquid poetry against the sharp edges, momentarily forgetting the mission's weight in the sheer grace of evasion. Leela, too, shed some of her internalized burden, her youthful spirit blooming as she mimicked the sprite's dizzying aerial arcs with surprising, light-footed competence. Hours later, leaving the adventurers breathless but the sprites gloriously entertained, the Seal of Air, a shard of smoky quartz, delicate and almost weightless, was relinquished with a final, joyous peal. Day 7 began with the necessary descent, trading thin air for the familiar, oppressive humidity bordering the sunken marshes. The cumulative fatigue, the bruising from the troll, the mental grind of the riddle, the relentless chase, dragged at the gates, yet the shared purpose had forged a new, brittle resolve. Dalton directed the convergence immediately upon re-entering the murk. By a slight rise that offered a precarious dryness, they arrayed the three gathered tokens, earth, wood, and air. Beric, meticulous in his craft, positioned the channeling array, mirrors angled just so, filings scattered with geometric intent, while Kalen held a sentinel's silence. Anya and Leela anchored the focus, lending their shared empathy to the nexus. The combined elemental surge was violent, tearing a visible pathway through the marsh's obfuscating wards, revealing a narrow, twisting track leading directly into the mire's forgotten core. Malakor's lair was a half-submerged tower of ruined masonry, a grim testament to arrogance refusing to crumble. Within, the magical fog was dense, swirling with residual, stagnant enchantments. They found the wizard in the vaulted apex chamber, where fractured moonlight struggled to illuminate the scene. Malakor stood before a massive, obsidian crystal, utterly black, which throbbed with captured energy. Within its depths, the faint, shimmering form of the water spirit struggled for release. The gaunt wizard sneered, recognizing his interruption. The final confrontation was brutal and swift. Malakor unleashed binding shadows, Dalton absorbed the brunt, drawing the fanatic's ire. Seeing a momentary break in the crystal's siphoning conduits, Beric deployed a tuned sonic resonator, a device years in the making, releasing a shriek that momentarily fractured Malakor's concentration. Kalen moved like a ripple in dark water, closing the gap and delivering a sharp, expertly placed strike to the wrist, disarming the caster with surgical precision. With Malakor stunned, Dalton's focused blade struck the dark crystal. It fractured, releasing not fire, but a powerful gush of pure, cold water magic. The naiad, now free, coalesced briefly, offered a silent, solemn nod of thanks to the exhausted party, and dissolved back toward its source. The tower, its anchor severed, let out a structural groan and began its final, sucking collapse into the mire. The journey back was weighted with exhaustion, yet sweetened by relief. As they approached the Silverstream Valley, they heard it, a distant, low murmur growing into a surging, glorious rush. The river lived again, reclaiming the thirsty earth. At the newly flowing banks, the celebration was immediate and unrestrained. The messenger, his face now luminous with relief, presented the dew, fine-woven linens and a pouch heavy with silver, enough to mend Beric's dented mail and ensure Anya's planting stock for seasons to come. It was a tangible reward for the arduous crucible of Seedtime and the hard-won restoration of life.